The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Tulsi Gabbard has submitted a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. From your perspective, who should the DOJ target as part of their investigation? What specific figures in the Obama administration?
Well, based on what I read, and I read pretty much what you read, it would be President Obama. He started it. And Biden was there with him, and Comey was there, and Clapper, the whole group was there. Brennan, they were all there in a room. Right here, this was the room. But the leader of the gang was President Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? And except for the fact that he gets shielded by the press for his entire life, that's the one they... Look, he's guilty. It's not a question. You know, I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason. This was every word you can think of. They tried to steal the election. They tried to obfuscate the election. They did things that nobody's ever even imagined, even in other countries. You've seen some pretty rough countries. This man has seen some pretty rough countries, but you've never seen anything like it. And we have all of the documents. And from what Tulsi told me, she's got thousands of additional documents coming. So President Obama, it was his concept, his idea, but he also got it from crooked Hillary Clinton. Crooked is a $3 bill. Hillary Clinton and her group, the Democrats, spent $12 million to Christopher Steele to write up a report that was a total fake report. Took 2 years to figure that out, but it came out that it was a total fake report. It was made up fiction.
Donald Trump stooping to an ugly new low, even for him. He's making a claim that will be heard the world over, reviving an old and familiar and rather tired tactic of accusing a perceived political enemy of treason. Only this time, the subject was his first-term predecessor, former President Barack Obama.
But what we just saw a clip of is the sitting president of the United States of America talking about one of his predecessors, Barack Obama, and using the word treason.
Yeah.
That is so far beyond the pale that, unfortunately, in the shocking tornado-like events that happen each and every day in the news business, people might be immune to it. It might go over their heads. But a sitting president of the United States using the word treason, look up the definition, about another president of the United States is beyond shocking.
Look up the definition and the possible punishments for treason in this country.
Former President Obama's office responding after Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard accused his administration of using, quote, manufactured intelligence about President Trump and Russia. Gabbard sending a referral to the Justice Department and calling for, quote, accountability. President Obama's office saying, quote, nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes. These findings were affirmed in 2020 in the report by the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee led by then Chairman Marco Rubio.
I mean, we should underscore just how dangerous that rhetoric is. Whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go after people. That if they follow through, that realizes the fears of so many people, when President Trump returned to office on a promise of retribution. That's what that would look like. And it's a rare rebuke from President Obama, who very rarely comments on events now by his successor, Donald Trump. You know, we'll hear from him in campaign season, but very little on official matters. So that shows you the seriousness of this.
The narrative is shifting. You can feel it almost. Monday, I told you how that they just ignored the Tulsi Gabbard documents that she revealed last Friday. Talked about all these other subjects. But to her credit, Tulsi Gabbard, and to his credit, Donald Trump, They're not letting this go for years and years. You look at the regime media. We heard, Russia. It was hacked. You heard the montage yesterday. Trump's illegitimate. He's illegitimate. And now, even though they don't like it, now you're hearing not Russia, and it was hacked in 2016. You're hearing Obama. And of course, treason. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show. You can get to the live video stream at trumpetdaily.com or at the Rumble channel. Just go to rumble.com/Trumpet Daily. If you go to the channel, give us the thumbs up, leave us a nice comment, and hopefully one of these days we'll get through some of our viewer feedback. Probably not today. Once again, a lot to get to. Some similar themes that we've been covering earlier this week. Another document released by Tulsi Gabbard. But how significant is, again, you could argue, Eli Lake says this in his article today, there's no new evidence here, there's no new facts, and well, I mean, he's delved into this and investigated it. Andy McCarthy, all of these smart conservative authors or writers. And yeah, the truth has been known in so many ways, but you can go back to the Nunes memo. I forget which year that was, 2018, I believe. The Nunes memo, you have the Horowitz report, you have the Durham report, and how frustrating was it? I mean, you heard it even on this show, that every time it was revealed, nothing was done. No one was held to account. No one was held to account during President Trump's first term. But, now it just feels different. I'm not promising that, Bondi's going to follow through and issue all kinds of indictments. But even yesterday in that Oval Office presser, President Trump said, you know what? In 2016, when I made it in, I went easy on Hillary Clinton. I joked about her, needing to be put in jail for all of the servers and the 33,000 emails and so on. But as he said yesterday, I mean, this time it's different. And of course, one theory that I have, because the report that was made available today, it's from September of 2020. And who was in charge at that time? That would be Donald Trump. So here's this, it's basically a review of the bogus ICA that Obama ordered in 2016. And we've been through that, through the first two shows of this week. But then, Trump's people are in charge. It's near the end of his first term. He orders this review, I assume he did, or whoever was over the DNI. They have this review, and then it's kept classified. They saw all of the ways. They reviewed it. It's what we're seeing now, basically. I'll get to it a little bit later. But the review is kept classified. When Obama comes out with his propaganda in 2016, I mean, that's made public right away. So if you follow this, the propaganda, I mean, that's public out there for everyone to see because they want to deceive. And then when you correct the mistake, there's like this quiet review and all of these weak suggestions at the end, nothing happens. Well, at least now the documents are being revealed. But my theory is, in the broader sense, President Trump, in that first term, I mean, he knew the deep state was there. He knew there were all these corrupt actors behind the hoaxes and the impeachments and everything else. But I think he treated it like Hillary Clinton. Well, let's give it a pass. And I'm going to win re-election anyway. And we'll try to bring the country together. I'll try to be nice. This is just my theory. But he didn't know what he was in store, what was coming. I mean, that was just the tip of the iceberg, the impeachments, the persecutions, and so on during the first term. Because when they completed the steal, I mean, that was just the beginning of a nightmare. 4 years I mean, he thought it was bad when he was in there the first term. Look at what they did to him after he left. They tried to assassinate him. They tried to destroy his family. They tried to ruin his business. They tried to send him to prison for hundreds and hundreds of years. So this time around, I think he sees more clearly what he's actually dealing with. You can't make nice with demons. You can't sit down and negotiate with these people. They are relentless in the way they come after you. They will not quit. And so he's taking a different tone. He won't let it go. Obama, 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 treason, treason, treason. Now Morning Meltdown has to talk about it. MSNBC has to talk about it. And Obama, how it was brought out in the cold open. I mean, even he's making a statement, or his team is, and he rarely comments on any of this. Yesterday he says that he acknowledged that they did not successfully manipulate any votes, Russia, in 2016. And they may have worded it back then to protect themselves using all the legalese. But as you heard in that montage we played yesterday, I mean, what is your ordinary, as Rush would have said, what does your low information voter think when you've got everyone and their dog saying it was hacked, it was hacked, it was hacked? I mean, Hillary Clinton, for her part, she said that the election was stolen from her, the 2016 election. It's okay for them to be election deniers. That's another thing Trump won't let go of. He brought it out in the presser yesterday. What happened during that first term, all this persecution, the bogus ICA, the Steele dossier, it morphed into the election steal. Now, there was a commentator on Fox last night that basically said it didn't say election or steal, but it said, what was going on in 2016 led into 2020. And I thought, uh-oh, maybe Fox News will come around and start uncovering the truth about the election steal. Because as I say, the real persecution was only just beginning there at the tail end of President Trump's first term. Just switching back to the meltdown here for a moment. Listen to this clip. How rich is it for the regime media to say, hey, hang on a second. We need a little more daylight between the president and the DOJ. You remember Obama? And I think Eric Holder just came right out and said, yeah, I was Obama's wingman. Wasn't it Loretta Lynch that got on the plane with Bill Clinton to sort out the emails, the servers? And as you've heard already this week, it was Obama who ordered all of the chiefs of these government agencies. No separation at all. But now you see President Trump, he's meddling. Yeah, he's complimenting Pam Bondi, so he must be directing this. Listen to clip 13.
I think, you're right to highlight the president's words there and how extremely out of line they are in terms of the normal procedures for the Justice Department and for the White House. Normally, there has been more of that break between the White House and the Justice Department, and what we've seen during this administration is sort of a shattering of those norms and them sort of working extremely closely together, and Pam Bondi sort of taking directions directly from President Trump. So that's just a very unusual circumstance that we're in here. But, this is, I think, one of the having that response from Obama is certainly something that, sticks out here because he has been quiet in the past. But
he's responding now. He's usually quiet, but now he's responding. You see, they're feeling the heat. They're wondering the dirty cops are wondering if this time it's for real. It's not just one of those passing comments, like he did with the Hillary Clinton debate. You'd be in jail. Now he's saying they need to be in jail. They need to be in jail. This is from the New York Times. A spokesman for former President Barack Obama issued a rare response to President Trump's baseless treason accusation. So this is, I assume this is in the main news section, and you get the editorializing in the first sentence. Baseless? Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. It says here the accusation against Obama and his declaration that it was time to go after people You see, the time to be nice and to try to bring them together or bring them over to our side, those days are over. It says here, the bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. That's the statement from the Obama camp. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes. I mean, you heard the montage yesterday. Hacked, hacked, hacked. And what does the low information voter think when he hears that? Oh, well, Trump worked with Russia to steal it. Hillary Clinton got robbed. But now you see they're coming back to some technicalities here and the exact wording because they're nervous. You know the narrative, we'll get to it in a second. The narrative that they were trying to establish was that he was a Russian agent, Donald Trump, that he stole the election with the help of Vladimir Putin. The latest document I mentioned, the 2020 review, it came out on September 18th, 2020. And as Sam and I discussed, I mean, yeah, Trump's people back then should have made it public. You know, there's an aside here about any time they have an internal review. In other words, they evaluate their own behavior or mistakes. They always go soft. I mean, I don't want to make this overly spiritual. I'm not expecting the U.S. government to come to a full understanding of what true repentance means, but it talks about God leading us to repentance. I mean, God, in other words, God has to show us what we did wrong, and then we have, with his help, we have to correct it. We have to change our behavior. But you get to the end of this review where they spend 45 pages basically saying, yeah, that whole ICA in 2016, or it came out in January of 2017, it was bogus, it was fake. And here's what we suggest the department should do to make sure this doesn't happen again. And it's so weak, even when it's coming from Republicans. The Bible says that God's word is like a sharp sword. It cuts, it stabs at the heart of that old man, which is evil and carnal and hostile to God's law. That's why we have to use the Bible as our guide, our foundation. Anytime you have an internal review at a government agency, you can be sure that it's not going to be based on a repentant mindset. That we need to change, that there need to be some punishments handed down too. I mean, it goes through there and says, yeah, Brennan was spearheading this effort. He had to have the dossier inserted into it. We got to make the boss happy, the dear leader. We're taking down Trump. And then you get to the end of the review, and it's pitifully weak. It's embarrassing. In any event, it's revealing too. Brennan really looks pretty bad. I think he might be sweating a little bit as well. Russia didn't do anything in 2016 that it hadn't done in previous elections. That's in the report. The review in 2020. Obama ordered the ICA to be made. You heard that from Clapper yesterday. Yeah, we were just following Obama's orders. He's the one that ordered it. Page 4 of this review that was made available just today. It says, one scant, unclear, and unverifiable fragment of a sentence from a single human intelligence report published under DCIA Brennan's December 2016 order constitutes the only classified information cited by the ICA. This is, again, reviewing that bogus ICA from January 2017 for the judgment that Putin aspired to help Trump's chances of victory when possible. They've got that last bit there in quotes. The ICA did not cite any report where Putin directly indicated helping Trump win was the objective. That judgment rested on a questionable interpretation of this one unclear fragment of a sentence. So here you're really kind of getting into the divine the motive mentality. There was no proof, but that didn't matter. Just hurry and look, the leaks let the cat out of the bag. They had the meeting ordering the new report or the assessment, and it was in the Washington Post and the New York Times in its entirety before they even started in on creating the fake ICA. It says here, the unclear fragment shown in bold is part of a sentence in a redacted letter or communication that reads, Putin had made the decision to leak DNC email. Doesn't talk anything about who's behind the hack of the DNC, but that's another story. After he had come to believe that the Democratic nominee had better odds of winning the U.S. presidential election and that candidate Trump, whose victory Putin was counting on, that's the obscure phrase, most likely would not be able to pull off a convincing victory. A senior CIA operations officer said of the fragment, whose victory Putin was counting on, said of the fragment, we do not know what was meant by that, and 5 people read it 5 ways. But that's the way it needs to be. Look, my father writes in America Under Attack, that section about Satan's influence here and how that Satan tries to complicate things enough so that most people just throw their hands in the air and say, well, I don't really understand it, but I guess I do grasp. Russia, 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 hack, hack, hack. Well, now the narrative shift is huge because they're getting a different message. Those that really don't want to dig into it and read Andy McCarthy's book or Greg Jarrett or any of the others, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, they've all written books about this criminal behavior. Kash Patel, the current FBI director, calls them gangsters. And they are. They're gangsters. That's the way Brennan is operating. You can see it even in this report, this review. Declassified just today. Before today, it was top secret. Yeah, reviewing the CIA and trying to figure out, how could they produce something so fake, so sinister, so evil, so untruthful. The review, top secret. The ICA, well, that's there forever. I mean, there's some statements in it that 5 people can read 5 different ways, but that's all. That doesn't matter. All that matters is Russia, Russia, Russia. We'll throw in Trump, Trump, Russia, and then hack, steal. They illegitimate. And you've got the message that the low information voter can run away with. Now there's been a massive shift in the narrative. And I think that's probably the biggest significance of what's happened over the past 5-6 days. It is frustrating. After the Nunes memo, after Horowitz, after Durham, all of this knowledge and nobody held to account. I mean, as I said yesterday at the end, what good is the knowledge if you don't act on it? Well, we'll give Hillary a pass. Some of it was just because she was kind of ignorant, having those servers and all those emails going all around the world that were top secret, by the way. We'll give her a pass. We'll move on. I'm going to win the second term anyway. Well, it didn't turn out that way, did it? And what we're seeing the second time around is, I think, a very different President Trump. He's not letting it go. Not letting it go. So the whole scandal, basically, that the ICA was trying to prove in that bogus assessment was based on that phrase. Not even sure who it came from. Whose victory Putin was counting on. He was counting on Trump winning. Classic Brennan. There were CIA officials, by the way, just looking at a few of the notes that Sam gave me. They wanted this quote removed from the review, but it was Brennan who came back and said, no, you got to keep it in there. You got to keep that in there. Page 9 of this review says, as with the other 2 substandard reports, CIA professionals originally declined to publish this information when it was acquired and only did so in response to Director Brennan's post-election full review order. So he wanted it in there. It had to be in. Brennan also wanted the Steele dossier in there. In Jack Cashell's book, he says that Comey wanted it to be the dirty dossier. He wanted it to be right within the assessment. As it turned out, it was one of the appendices, tacked on at the end. And you heard about how Jake Tapper and all the rest reported on that just a few days after the report was released. Page 23, 2 CIA officers, senior officers, one from Russia operations and the other from Russia analysis, argued with Director Brennan that the dossier should not be included at all in the ICA because it failed to meet basic tradecraft standards, according to a senior officer present at the meeting. The same officer said that Director Brennan refused to remove it, and when confronted with the dossier's many flaws, responded, "Yes, but doesn't it ring true?" That's the director of the CIA who voted for the Communist Party in 1976. You might remember, some of you. He voted. How did he ever even get in government? He's a communist. And he's insisting that the dossier is inserted into the intelligence assessment, the ICA. As I say, Comey wanted it to be even more prominently featured. Yeah, put it in there because it has a ring of truth. They divine the motive. I mean, this is what made Bill Barr come out of retirement to try to help Donald Trump at least a little bit. He turned out to be a weakling. But still, this is the way these people operate. Show me the man, I'll find you the crime. Doesn't it have a ring of truth? These are senior CIA officials, one of them from Russia operations, the other from Russia analysis. These are like Russian experts. And they're pleading with Brennan, don't include this dirty dossier in an intelligence assessment. And Brennan says, you know, it has a lot of flaws, but it has a ring of truth. A ring of truth. This is treason. President Trump is right to not let it go. Same with Tulsi. So you get to the end of this 45-page review from 2020. And what do they conclude? What are their recommendations? Again, this is all internal. Nobody should see this. We're actually evaluating ourselves. That's top secret. And how did they conclude this report? Recommendation number 1, improve peer review of controversial assessments involving limited access intelligence. Let's get a little bit more review in the process. Okay. Recommendation number 2, require political appointees to recuse themselves from management of controversial assessments during the presidential transition. Okay, get a few people to recuse themselves. And then this is number 3, mandate a special context statement for publishing and citing substandard raw intelligence reports. See, this is the way Brennan and company are used to being corrected. With nothing, not even a slap on the wrist. Mandate a special context statement? I don't even know what that means. These people operate as if they're above the law. And now, now they're worried. Now they're concerned. You can see it from Obama's statement yesterday. You can see it from the panic on the talk shows, the arguing. There was a roundtable last night on MSNBC as they just tried to shout down the one conservative there that said, well, Obama did say that not one vote changed in 2016. I mean, that's a pretty big detail. In other words, it wasn't hacked. They're backpedaling now. It's pretty amazing what we're seeing. 45 pages. They review this bogus document. They correct themselves. They dust off their hands, and then they move on. It's pretty incredible. When you look at this kind of weakness, when you look at this kind of review, when you look at this kind of process, when you look at these kinds of Marxist actors working in the deep state of the United States and what they got away with, what they nearly completed, fundamental transformation, America's destruction. As I said yesterday, I mean, it's a miracle It's a miracle that somehow Donald Trump was able to work his way past all of this onslaught of persecution. Listen to Larry Kudlow from yesterday, clip 9.
No wonder President Trump gets pretty angry about this stuff. Here it goes. I mean, you can't blame the guy. I know this is a providential presidency. He's there because God wanted to save him.
He's there because God wanted to save him. God did save him. God saved America temporarily. But as I say, the more and more you see the sins being exposed, the more you see just how far-reaching this problem really and truly is. As I said, with respect to their internal reviews, the spirit of repentance is nowhere. And so what does that get us in the end? If we have all of this knowledge and no action, the Bible says if you hear but you don't do, then you're just deceiving yourself. And that's what Satan loves. He loves to see hearers that might see the truth even, but they don't do anything with it. They don't act on it. It's like it says in the end of Ezekiel 33. In some cases, they like the sound of God's truth. It sounds wonderful. It sounds pleasant. They like to hear the truth straight up. But will you do something with it? My father in the Trumpet brief on Monday, by the way, he talked about that transition period from December 7-ish, 2016 to January 16th, 2017. And he says here one additional truth he learned from all of these revelations from Tulsi Gabbard, how Obama and Clapper decided on December 7, 2016 to make a new fraudulent intelligence assessment. And then he looked at that timeline back when he was fired. I alluded to this the other day, but he was fired on December 7th, 1989. And of course, there's the January 16 date, which is when Herbert Armstrong died back in 1986. And so he's drawn a lot of attention to this 40-day period over the years. He says, in my book, America Under Attack, I highlight the history of Antiochus Epiphanes, who desecrated the Holy of Holies in the temple of God with an idol of Jupiter Olympus. He committed that abominable act on Kislev 15 in 167 BC. A footnote in the New American Bible explains that Kislev 15 likely coincided with December 6 in the year of 167. So December 7 would have been the first day the priests were prohibited from performing their sacrifices. It's interesting that this happened on the same date when I was fired by an Antiochus-like figure in God's church, God's end-time church. I also believe that Obama's activities during the 40 days between December 7, 2016 and January 16, 2017 were prophetically significant. And then he refers the readers to the January 6 God's Miracle Day booklet. So some interesting, a lot of different angles that you can get at here with everything that we see happening. This is Fox News, its take on the latest document that Tulsi Gabbard has released. It says the intelligence community did not have any direct information that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to help elect Donald Trump during the 2016 presidential election. But at the unusual direction of then President Barack Obama, published potentially biased or implausible intelligence suggesting otherwise, the House Intel Committee found. It says, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard declassified a report prepared by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence back in 2020. Well, that makes it even kind of worse. I was thinking it was an internal review, but this was the House. These are the politicians that you vote into office that are supposed to provide oversight. And then they come to the end of the assessment or the review with their weak recommendations, and then nothing happens. No one's held to account. You can see another angle from all of this is you see how important it is to have strong, courageous, rising lion leadership. I mean, you've got to have someone that's willing to confront. We'll see if that's the case with the head of the DOJ. But right now, I mean, listening to him talk, I mean, it seems like President Trump wants to confront this. And I don't know what all the ramifications are with respect to, you know, the statute of limitations and that sort of thing, but he won't let it go. And at the very least, as I've said this week, the narrative is shifting in a massive, monumental way, for sure. It's nice to finally see all of this corruption on display and explained in a way where even the low information voter can begin to understand. Oh, hang on a second. Obama was behind a false report to try to take down Donald Trump? Obama's a traitor? Obama was directing a rolling coup? I mean, at the very least, as I've said already, just the fact that you're hearing Obama and treason in the same sentence, that in itself is a remarkable shift. You know, when Nunes came out with his report, when Horowitz came out with his, when Durham came out with his, Obama was high. Obama was powerful. People were still swooning before Obama. But now with Tulsi Gabbard, Obama's low. Obama's been silenced. Obama is weak. They're not swooning before Obama. And they're worried. And that's why Obama, who's typically silent when these sorts of accusations are flying around, he had to come out with a statement yesterday, carefully worded. Oh, yes. And then the talking heads just screaming to try to shout down those that would expose this lawlessness. Listen to, again, the Oval Office yesterday with President Trump. He was in there with the president of Philippines, by the way. Here's clip 5.
No, we caught Hillary Clinton. We caught Barack Hussein Obama. They're the ones, and then you have many, many people under them. Susan Rice, they're all there. The names are all there. And I guess they figured they're going to put this in classified information and nobody will ever see it again, but it doesn't work that way. And it's the most unbelievable thing I think I've ever read. So you ought to take a look at that and stop talking about nonsense, because this is big stuff. Never has a thing like this happened in the history of our country. And by the way, it morphed into the 2020 race. And the 2020 race was rigged, and it was a rigged election.
It morphed into the 2020 race. And that was the election that was rigged. That's the one that was stolen. That's the one that led to an illegitimate president, a fake president, Joe Biden. And then there's the cover-up with that. I mean, and the intense persecution, the fake insurrection on January 6th, silencing Donald Trump, the raid of Mar-a-Lago, all of the lawfare, 2 assassination attempts. And this time he comes around and says, you know what? I was nice to Hillary Clinton last time. This time, people ought to be held to account. Because there's treason here. There's treason. And he's right. He's right. He talks about it morphing into the 2020 race. Listen to this one from Laura Ingraham last night as she talks about it again. She doesn't say election rigging or anything like that in 2020, but she kind of talks about the morphing into 2020. Clip 12.
They all worked to subvert an election, and then when the unthinkable happened, Donald Trump won, they hoped they could still hobble his presidency. And remember, everything they did also bled into the 2020 campaign. Because of Obama, there were far-reaching repercussions from the Russia collusion fraud.
It all bled into the 2020 campaign. And just step back for a moment for those that would still say, you know what, the election in 2020, it's long gone. We can't go back and change it. But here again, the internal reviews lead to no repentance. Nobody's punished. That's why you need to go back and learn from that history. But just think about this for a moment. Obama and his team, his people, created this fake intelligence assessment so that they could keep investigating Trump, kick off the special counsel investigation. Oh, and by the way, they attached this fake Hillary Clinton created dossier to the fake assessment. It was all a fraud. But thankfully, when it comes around to the 2020 election, everything was perfect. None of these deep state actors would dare do anything fraudulent. Just think about how insane it is to conclude that. Of course they'd steal an election. They'll steal any election they can if they have the means to do it. In the case of 2020, they weaponized a China virus, and they sent out hundreds, well, at least 100 million mail-in ballots. And then they had all kinds of mules that were stashing those ballots in the box, just like you saw on Dinesh D'Souza's documentary. Fraud through and through. That's the way these people operate. And as I say, given all of this, it's a miracle. Just like Larry Kudlow said, it's a miracle. Divine providence. Laura Ingraham said it on the clip we played yesterday. It's an absolute miracle that Donald Trump won the election last November. Well, I have more clips, but somehow I'm looking at a section of my notes where I must have done the wrong cut and paste. So I'll check my emails, and when we come back from a short break, I'll see if I want to play any more of those or move along into another story that's been tucked away at the back of my notes for the last couple of days. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We'll be right back.
Daily news, Bible prophecy. See the connection on the Trumpet Daily. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the flood of news and information? You need something to sift the news and bring you only what matters most. You need the Trumpet Daily. You also need something to help you understand not just what's happening now, but what will happen next. You need the Trumpet Daily. Only the Trumpet Daily accurately matches daily news to precise Bible prophecies. Because Bible prophecy is the only tool up to the task of sifting the news down to what's important and showing you what will happen next. Join host Stephen Flurry every weekday. Go to trumpetdaily.com.
But what we just saw a clip of is the sitting president of the United States of America talking about one of his predecessors, Barack Obama, and using the word treason.
Yeah.
That is so far beyond the pale that unfortunately in the shocking tornado-like events that happen each and every day in the news business, people might be immune to it. It might go over their heads. But a sitting president of the United States using the word treason, look up the definition, about another president of the United States is beyond shocking.
Look up the definition and the possible punishments for treason in this country.
So that was in the cold open. As I say, I'm sorry I got my some of my clips mixed up, but I did want to at least play a couple more before I shift into Syria. Play clip 10.
What do you make of this thing? I don't know. Treachery, sordid, subversion. I mean, there's all kinds of adjectives can be used. But this was one unsavory, sordid part of American history, that's for sure. How do you see it, Molly?
Objectively speaking, this is the worst scandal we've ever seen from our government in our nation's history. Efforts to destroy a presidency are seditious, and this is a very serious issue for these leaders in the intel community.
But they actually went in before he was actually sworn in as president and told him they're going to go after him, and then just plagued most of his first term? I mean, really? How is this possible? How can this go unpunished? That's what I'm asking. I'm not the lawyer. I'm not a cop. I'm a journalist. I just want to know, how can this possibly go unpunished?
Seditious, treasonous activity or crimes. And he's right. I mean, how can it go unpunished? When you think about it, I mentioned this yesterday, judgment and justice That's what God is. I mean, among other things, yeah, he's merciful and kind and forgiving. He'll forgive you instantly upon repentance. But he's also a God of judgment and justice, and we have to look to him for justice. My father has a great section in the Psalter of Terror booklet where he talks about justice. I'll just read to you Isaiah 9 and verse 7. Christ coming back, establishing God's government with judgment and justice. And then this psalm, it goes through Psalm 9 and then Psalm 37, some of these quotes that I've arranged. But at the end of Psalm 37, my father says, this is the big picture. I'll leave it to you to just study that psalm on your own. This is the big picture that we must remember as we look at this upside down world. Evil is good, black is white world. Consider the end. It says, get your mind on how God will ultimately set everything right. Get your mind on God, the God of justice, because we don't see much of it in this world. As I said yesterday, I mean, we got the justice we deserved when fighting for mystery of the ages outside of the courts, because those inside the courts were so corrupt, so biased in their rulings. We got the literature. We're distributing it now. We have been for years. But it took a miracle from God. God's trying to get our attention, just looking at the world at large, looking at our nations. He's trying to get our attention. He's trying to get us to see just how horrible, how sinful the human heart is, and how much we need him to heal. We need a physician, like Jesus said in Matthew 9. We need a physician because we need to be healed of our sickness, spiritual sickness. Only God can do it. This story regarding an individual that was killed during that massacre last week in Syria, and really this is about the only program that even talks about it. And I know there's lots of other things going on in the news cycle, but still, one of them he's a Druze, so he's probably Syrian as far as his ethnicity goes. But he was actually an American citizen, right here from Oklahoma. He's an Oklahoman, and he was gunned down in front of a firing squad in Syria. This is what Bibi Netanyahu was trying to prevent. This is why he intervened to bomb Syria last week. And you've probably heard nothing about this particular story. I will warn you. I mean, we cut it off right at the time that he's put down in line on his knees with 5 or 6 other guys. And these madmen just mow them down with bullets. Before that, they parade them through the streets. Yeah, they're prisoners. They captured the Druze, these Syrian soldiers. I mean, this is something straight out of the Nazi Holocaust, 1941, 1942, and it's happening in our world today. Israel intervening to try to stop another massacre. And you'll notice, too, as they're parading them through, and I'm not even showing you the worst of it, but if you do have children watching the show with you, you might want to, excuse them from the room for a moment. It's not horrible, but it shows you what is happening in this world and how upside down it is, like my father says in that quote. We have to look to God for justice. The first part of this quote, or clip rather, it's the local report from right here in Oklahoma, and then it cuts to the footage. And you'll notice too, as you see it, that the terrorists, they're proudly filming it. They want the whole world to see. This is clip 16.
Federal officials say an Oklahoman was executed alongside his family in Syria.
Oklahoma senators say Hossam Soraya was a member of the Druze community.
Senator Markwayne Mullin saying he is working with his partners in the region, and he's in touch with Governor Kevin Stitt about the situation.
And Senator James Lankford says that he is praying for his family, friends, and the entire community as they grieve this senseless loss.
Just gunned them all down. as they chanted that God is great. They love God. They hate the Druze, but I guess they love God. This is from the State Department. They said on Tuesday, so yesterday, that a U.S. citizen was killed in Syria after disturbing videos surfaced showing him among a group of men apparently being executed by Syrian government forces. Syrian government forces. You know the leader of Syria, right? The former Al-Qaeda guy? The former ISIS guy? It says here, we offer condolences to the family on their loss and are providing consular assistance to them, the State Department said in a statement. We're greatly concerned when a U.S. citizen is harmed overseas where they are. The U.S. calls for accountability in all cases where U.S. citizens are harmed abroad. Not really the strongest condemnation here. I mean, the guy was just gunned down in front of this Nazi line of machine guns. Terrorists firing away. It says here, a close friend of the Sarayas, that would be one of the guys, the Oklahoman, who worked with Hassam, told ABC News that he spoke with Hassam and his relatives last Tuesday night, and that they told him bombs had been falling around their home. On Wednesday, the friend who only wants to be identified as Omar heard from other family members that Hassam and the others had been taken from their home by government forces. Now, you compare that with the Axios story from over the weekend. And the Axios loves this kind of story. Anything they can do to drive a wedge between the president of the U.S. and Bibi Netanyahu. It says here, as smoke and debris swirled over the Syrian presidential palace, the chatter in the West Wing grew louder. Benjamin Netanyahu is out of control. No, I think it's actually those terrorists, those ISIS-like guys that are out of control. I think it might be the president of Syria who's out of control. What they're saying, Bibi acted like a madman. He bombs everything all the time. These are White House officials in Trump's ear. Bibi's the madman. No, here again, the Syrian president is the madman. Okay, let's try to turn it right side up. How about that? The Syrian president, all of these government forces that are just taking families out of their home, kneeling them down before a firing squad. I mean, that's about as demonic as you could get. It's a shame, right? As I've been saying with President Trump. On the one hand, you see some fighting spirit. No, we were easy on Hillary last time. This time, people are going to be held to account. Syria, not so much, because we got to make a deal. And so all these people, if you can imagine this, I mean, you talk about a demonic mindset. I have to say, Bibi's a madman. He's out of control. You don't even know the facts on the ground. People are being murdered. Mass murders. Hundreds. I mean, they'd kick it up to 1,200 like October 7 if they could. Probably 12,000 if they had the firepower. And Bibi tries to stop it. He is the only one. I mean, he has no skin in the game. I mean, he's got Druze in Israel that were urging him to do something because their family and relatives were up north and they're being gunned down. So he does something, and what do these White House officials say? That Bibi's the problem. Can you believe it? Bibi's the problem. Bibi's trying to stop the problem. Bibi's trying to correct the problem. Bibi's showing some rising lion strength. He's showing courage. He bombs everything all the time, said one White House official, referring to Netanyahu by his nickname. This could undermine what Trump is trying to do. Yeah, the terrorists massacring those Druze in that little village, that doesn't undermine what Trump's trying to do. It's Bibi. That's the message here. It says here, a second senior U.S. official also pointed to the shelling of a church in Gaza last week, which led, well, there's the misfire, and Israel apologizes profusely. It is, after all, a war, though. It's in some ways, it's a miracle that Bibi is even acting the way that he is, acting with courage. In a world like what we see today, where there's just so much weakness, where there's just so much evil, and the perpetrators oftentimes just get away with it. They're let off scot-free. Coming back to judgment and justice, like my father says in the Tara booklet, all of this should motivate us to just look to God for that coming justice. It is coming. He is a God of judgment. He's a God of love. But sometimes he has to administer punishment in love to settle things down, to get us moving in the direction of his law, and to bring peace to the whole earth. I took you a minute over, but I will not charge you yearly subscribers who are paying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to watch this show. No, just kidding. It's free. It's totally free. It's offered without cost or obligation. And sometimes we give you a little more free material. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. Thank you for joining us on today's show, and we'll see you tomorrow.